Next we'll have comments from the public to ensure the public's right to be heard. The board set aside time during the meeting for public comments. 2 minutes will be allotted to each speaker, and a maximum of 15 minutes to each subject. Now's your chance, guys, for sure. Seeing that there are none. Before we start the meeting, or the board's recommendation, I do want to share that our community experienced a significant tragedy this past weekend. Thank you. That has left our beloved West School librarian, Patrick Murrin, and his family with an unimaginable loss. And I'd like for everyone to please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you. Please keep Mr. Murrin and his family in your thoughts and prayers, and we'll be notified shortly of the dates and times of the services. Moving on to reports and recognition. We'll start with a staffing update from Darlene, please.
Good evening. Thanks for the opportunity to share some information around our hiring over the last few months. As usual, our administrators and their building or district level teams have done a really fabulous job with the hiring, both in terms of the timeliness. As I told you previously, we started early, and the quality of the candidates that we did end up securing. As you know, our process continues to be multi-tiered, so each applicant goes through at least 2 interviews, and depending on the position, a specifically designed performance task that the committee does view, and then the finalists come to me to meet with me for every position. As of today, there are a total of 32 certified hires across the district, and many of the hires have been in deeply difficult areas of shortage, and I'll explain what they are and kind of take you through that quickly. So in terms of new hires that are at district level, we have 2. A psychologist position that we were unable to fill last year that we're able to fill this year, and the classroom coach that we added through our budget process this year. At East School, we had 5 hires, 2 classroom teachers, a school psychologist, a special education teacher, and we were also able to secure a 1-year leave special education teacher there, which is a feat unto itself. We're really happy about that. At South School, 2 positions, tech integrator and another special education teacher, 1-year leave replacement we filled, and those are family leaves. At West School, 2 preschool teachers we were able to secure. At Saks, a total of 8, so 2 French teachers, count them, 2. 3 special education teachers, an art teacher, a grade 6 teacher, and a math and a grade 5 teacher. At New Canaan High School, and this is very unusual, typically we don't have more than 2 or 3 or 4 openings at the high school. This year we had 13. An art teacher, 2 guidance counselors, a school psychologist, a special education teacher, a physics and chemistry teacher, a social studies teacher, a math interventionist, which was the new position that came through this year's budget, a Spanish teacher, a French teacher, and 2 social workers. And by the way, they're all fabulous, and I'm not just saying that, right, Bill?
And another psychologist.
And another psychologist. All of our schools at this point are fully staffed in their building sub positions. So these are the 1-year contract positions, 1 in each of the elementaries, 2 at the middle school and 1 at the high school. So those are all fully staffed. At this point, in terms of certified staff, we have a school psychologist position that just opened up as a result of a transfer from Saks to the high school. and we are looking at filling that position currently. Other openings that we have right now that are not necessarily certified are in the food service area, special education and general education TAs, and we are continually working through hiring 2 or 3 of those a week. So we're doing well with that. A few positions in maintenance and custodial. If anyone knows a really good electrician or is watching, that would be wonderful. We've really been searching high and low for that, and we haven't been able to fill that yet. And just for your information, so as of today, we have 32 certified staff that would be attending new teacher induction, and just by way of comparison, last year we had in the low 50s. So we're a little lower. Also, I wanted to mention that in the postings on the district website, there are a number of postings that do stay up pretty consistently throughout the year. So we are always posting for substitutes just in our general substitute category, and we're continuing to interview people and have hired some this year. I believe we're at about 85 right now, which is increased up from last year. We also continually ask for, in the ad, homebound tutors and English as a second language tutors, so we're always looking for those. That's always posted. General food service workers is a category that we're typically intermittently looking for. And the theater positions. There are so many productions, and over the course of the year, they're hiring for different productions. So those are always up. Let's see, that's everybody. Oh, also, we've secured a few student teachers. We have about half of the interns that were budgeted for hired as well, interviewed and hired as well. So I guess I would say that I think we're in really, really good shape. I'm supposing that the certified school psychologist position that we have currently will be wrapped up by probably the end of this week. We have already done the interviews and met with some people. And barring some surprise during the summer, which typically does happen, we did have a beginning of the summer retirement that we weren't aware of when we were celebrating. That brings us to 9, and last year we were at 9 as well. So that's pretty comparable. And the only other thing that I'll add is I'm really excited about the quality of the candidates that we're getting. The teams, as I said, in the buildings did such a great job of vetting, screening, vetting, and bringing candidates to them that by the time I meet the finalist candidates, I'm pretty sure that they're the best candidate. So I think we're in really good shape, and we were in really good shape by probably about 2 weeks ago. So I'm excited for the district. Thanks.
It's great news all around. Thank you very much, Darlene. Good work. Questions, comments? All right, moving on. Thank you. Facility capacity presentation. All been waiting for.
Yes, while they make their way over to the table, I'll do a brief introduction. I'm very pleased to welcome and to introduce our friends from M&P Planning. When the board, about a year ago, give or take, started really looking at the numbers and thinking about what future plans should be, I made some calls to some of my colleagues in Darien and Westport and Wilton, and they kept recommending the same 2 people, and it was Mike and Pat. They said, you've got M&P Planning is the best. You want to line it up with them. They know the process and the information. They do great reporting. And so, not to put you on the spot, but that was feedback across the board in the area, so he did. And I'm thrilled also to see that Mike and Pat reach out to SLAM, who we've used in the past here and there. We've done great work. If members of the facilities committee went on a visit to Ox Ridge over in Darien, and it was the SLAM group that did that work over there. Kemp Morehart was involved with our SACS project, just recently. That's right, just recently. And Jim Hogland was involved also with the SACS project before. right? The previous Saks project, when the front of the building was built in the cafeteria and others. So there are 4 folks here who know our district, who've done good work in the district, and thrilled to have you here, and thank you for giving us this, sharing this information with us today.
Thanks for the introduction, Brian. Pat Gallagher, principal with MP Planning, here with my partner Mike Zuba, as well as our colleagues Kent Morhart and Jim Hoagland from SLAM. We also have our engineering consultant, SLR, who's not represented today in our team, but also played an integral role in this study. So we'll go through kind of the background first, and then eventually leading into our recommendations out of this process. And you know, as we've gone through this process, we're really keeping in mind, you know, the long-range vision for the district. So we know it's been a long-standing goal within the community. There's been a lot of discussions around moving to the K568 configuration. So this plan was really looking at you know, the best options of moving the district towards that long-standing goal, consistent with your peer districts. We're looking to align our facilities with modern educational programming needs and provide flexibility for future needs, creating smaller learning communities by shrinking the student population at the elementary and middle schools. We'll get a little more into that on a future slide. We want to modernize elementary facilities to maintain your high standards for facilities and educational delivery, support enrollment growth, and we want this study to really provide a framework as you get into some more detailed architectural engineering studies once we pass the baton here. So our process started with conditions and trends, so looking at our current and projected enrollment over a 10-year period, and then we conducted a capacity and utilization study. So that determined what the capacity of each building was relative to your educational program, and noted any deficiencies, which really informed the next task of our work, master planning, looking at options for the future. And like many communities that are built out, you know, you don't have a lot of land. That becomes a really huge part of the process. How can we adapt facilities or build new facilities to meet this vision? So we'll go through that in more detail. And then ultimately having some more details around costs and timeline are always really important as part of a long-range planning process. After this process concludes, then we move into, again, those detailed studies in support of a grant application to the state of Connecticut. So to kind of frame this, we're going through some of the challenges that we observed as we went through this process. The first challenge, our elementary school capacity. We do this a lot in the state, and you know, ideally what we've seen is that 90 to 95% of the planning capacity is really ideal for districts. They kind of operate efficiently, but they also have some flexibility to support enrollment growth. They have some resilience to bubbles if you get a big grade that comes through in kindergarten. And also, we recognize enrollment grows throughout the year. So we always use October enrollment as kind of our census date. We know by June, enrollment is typically higher in communities like New Canaan. And what we're seeing in New Canaan is that today, especially at East, we are operating basically at the planning capacity as of October. I think by the end of the school year, you are over that 100% of the planning capacity. And as enrollment is projected to grow by about 140 students over the next 6 years, district-wide, we're expecting the utilization to exceed 100%. And when utilization exceeds 100%, we have operational impacts. We see that at East already, where the orchestra room was displaced. We had to carve off a small space out of the old music room. We have an undersized music room, a small orchestra room. The science lab had to move to the old orchestra room. And those are the kinds of operational impacts that you see at buildings that are at or close to 100% utilization. And so we've highlighted that in yellow here. Not only do we see that continuing at East, but we also see West continuing to move into that category by 2028-29, and then even South School, which today has the lowest utilization, by 2028-29 is going to be exceeding that ideal 90 to 95% range, reaching the high 90s. So really, again, one of the rationales for this is how do we address this capacity challenge? Hand in hand with that is evolving space needs. We recognize your buildings were renovated extensively in the late 1990s and largely reflect the educational program of that day. And periodically, you know, we recognize districts need to make investments in facilities to align them with how you meet education or how you deliver education today. And so the largest efficiency is in those small and medium-sized spaces that support special education, various pull-out services, and the support staff within your buildings. Most of your buildings have a plethora of large classroom spaces, and if you don't have small and medium-sized spaces, your specialists and special education staff move into full-size classrooms, and oftentimes they are sharing space with their peers, which again is not ideal. And so again, a real driver of our process is to modernize that space within your existing buildings to align with how you educate the children today. We also did a peer analysis, so looking at your peer districts and their grade configurations and the size of their schools. We know, working with Brian and the facilities committee, that you guys recognize that you have among the largest elementary schools in your peer group. So you average over 500 students in your 3 elementary schools. We're showing that 3 of your peer districts, neighboring communities, which are averaging anywhere from 350 to about 480. And all of those peers are also at the K-5 and pre-K-5 model. So again, looking to decrease the size of the enrollments within your buildings to be more in line with your peers, as well as looking at grade configuration. Back when you renovated your buildings in 1997, pre-K was also not the same program as it is today. So today, that program has expanded to 5 classrooms at West Elementary School. And one of the challenges with that program is those preschool classrooms are not in purpose-built space. 3 of the rooms do not have in-room toilets, so there's toilets out in the hallway. And we also know pre-K has support staff that need to be proximate to those classrooms, and there's limited space for those staff at West, as well as they're kind of scattered throughout the building, and so we're not able to necessarily cordon off that area of the building like we would if we were designing a new pre-K wing of a building today. And so the challenge is if that program needs to grow, there really isn't room to grow that program at West without displacing the K-4 program. So one of the steps we took was looked at the existing elementary school sites and said, okay, how conducive are these sites to expansion? And what we found was they're not very conducive to expansion. The sites are too small to support moving 5th grade to the existing 3 elementary schools. And in fact, the sites are undersized relative to the current population, K-4 and pre-K-4. If you were building a new school, the state recommends a minimum site size for an elementary school of 10 acres plus 1 acre for every 100 students. So 500 student elementary school, ideally you'd have a 15-acre site. Your sites today are between 12 and 13 acres of usable acreage, so smaller than that, let alone adding 5th grade. And so we did not see that as a viable option to be able to add on to those buildings sufficiently to provide space for 5th grade while also maintaining bus drop-offs, a parent queue, play fields, playgrounds, et cetera. And in addition, the core spaces would need to be enlarged to support 5th grade, your cafeterias, your gyms, and again, the buildings were not designed in a way where those spaces are easily expandable. The middle school, also we recognize that it is a different grade configuration than your peers and larger. In fact, it's, as of last fall, the largest middle school in the state, almost 1,300 students. And so again, one of the goals would be to bring the grade configuration and enrollment more in line with your peer districts. So moving to that 6-8 configuration. So having eliminated K-5 in the existing school sites, that really only leaves a 4th site to build an elementary school to support that K-5 model. We did a town-wide parcel search looking for sites that were at least 15 acres that could support the 4th school. And the only site that was undeveloped that met our criteria was the Clark property, located on Smith Ridge Road in the northern part of town. It is on a state road, which is always good when we're looking to site a school, knowing that there is traffic, so having access from a state road is certainly a benefit. It's also located in the northern part of town, which is the only quadrant in town that does not have a school. So we're filling in that missing quadrant. And those students in that part of town have long bus rides to either east or west today. So leading into our recommendations, phase 1 is to build a 4th elementary school on the Clark property, what we're calling the North School. This would have a target enrollment of between 470 to 500 students, approximately 80,000 square feet, similar to your other 3 elementary schools, and this project would allow you to move to the K-5, 6-8 grade configuration. Phase 2 would be alterations to the existing elementary schools, and that would align the 3 existing schools and create really that parity with the new school. Redesign those buildings to align with that modern educational program, while also addressing any facility condition needs that may have arisen over the last 30 years. And again, we're targeting about 470 to 500 students within each of the 4 elementary schools if that alignment were to move forward. Once fifth grade moves out of Saks, that also opens up some opportunities in the lower level of Saks. And so for phase 3, we are showing a reconfiguration of the lower level of Saks to support the pre-K program, which would move out of West, as well as house the district-wide central office. And by moving to the 6-8 alignment, we would shrink the size of the student population of Saks to no longer be the largest middle school in the state of Connecticut. We are showing a schedule here, and schedule is important because it's one of the factors that went into the costs that our SLAM partners will share. We did factor in escalation to the midpoint of construction, and so the milestones that are laid out in this schedule are baked into the cost model. Should that timeline change, the costs would just need to be updated to reflect that change in schedule. So we are showing a fairly aggressive schedule where that phase 1 project for the new North School would be submitted to the state in June of 2026 for a school construction grant application. Phase 2 would be in June of 2028, phase 3 in June of 2029. We're showing about a 4-year schedule from when the grant application is submitted for the new North School to when it would open in the fall of 2030. Phase 2, we're showing about a 16-month construction timeline completed in the fall of 2031. And phase 3, the lower level fit out of Saks, completed in the fall of 2032. And so these are staggered because each phase is kind of dependent on the one before it. So just to get a little more into the details of the new North School, our project partners at SLR actually went out to the site this past fall and GPSed the wetlands to get a better understanding of where those were on site. It really impacts the overall site design and building location on the site because we want to minimize wetland impact. They identified the most ideal area for crossing the wetlands that has the lowest level of disturbance. And they also helped codify the areas of more moderate slopes that could support a building. Some of the things that we uncovered as part of this, the site has no public utilities, so it would need to be served by septic and well, something we could talk about on a later slide. We have some moderate and steep slopes to work around. I think Jim and Kemp and their team did a really fantastic job of kind of working with the site, not fighting it, kind of aligning any design with kind of the natural features. We know we need to be sensitive to neighbors. It's a developed residential area, so buffers that we think are going to be critical. And then currently, the site really is limited in terms of access for the community. I believe probably the neighboring properties are really the only ones who have the ability to use this property on a regular basis. So by kind of developing the site, it not only opens up the school for community use, but potential other community uses on the site as well. I'll pass it over to Jim to walk us through our test fit.
Thanks, Pat. So MP asked SLAM to come in and take a look. After some of the overall engineering was done, SLR looked at the site, they did the survey, mapped the wetlands. So we were given that information, and then we looked at it from an architectural standpoint. There's a relatively small, about half of the site is actually buildable once you look at the wetlands and all the setbacks, all the regulatory requirements that we'd have to meet, rear yard setbacks, side yard setbacks. So we identified the buildable area. We also took a look at the topography and started dropping some footprints throughout the site to see where we could optimize the building location and the access, and then create all the correct adjacencies that we'd have to do for the parking that we know needs to exist, as well as play fields and play areas. We landed on a scheme that I think this design team is very comfortable with. I think we reinforced the idea that we could make this building work on this site. It's sizable enough, so coming off Smithridge Road, we have a main access road which gets rather lengthy, but it pushes us to the middle portion of the site and allows for that buffering that Pat was alluding to. We know we have neighbors surrounding the site. We want to be respectful of that if you're going to develop the site. So putting the building as close to the middle of the site as possible allows us to leave the natural vegetation at the perimeter and build up that buffering for the adjacent neighbors. We think that's going to be an important point as you move forward through the planning here. Also, as we come in off of Smith Ridge Road, that lengthy road comes in. We know that looking at the state and the criteria, some of the safety and security criteria, they like to see 2 different access points. So that's why we've identified the emergency access off Michigan coming in. That would probably be gated so that only emergency vehicles could come in and out of there. And then as we approach into the site, we also know that, there's going to be some play fields. So we started looking at the topography, and we felt that the building was the most appropriate program piece to take up that steepest topography. So we left the flattest part of the site for the play fields, which would minimize any kind of grading and drainage in that area. And we also know that we have a septic system that we're going to have to engineer, as well as wells. So that's where SLR, was a great design partner. We went through and looked at some of the regulations that we would have to meet as far as separation, distance separation from the wells that would be proposed, as well as the septic system and the distance we need between those. So this overall site plan, I think this design team is really comfortable with how it's working out. So zooming in on the building itself a little bit, we felt that some of the conversations that we had with the educators and some of the representatives at the table through our meeting was to recognize that this is going to be a community use building. So the general organization, we broke the building into 2 separate parts, an academic portion and then a community use portion. And you can see the 2 big boxes clearly labeled. So the blue box on the left would be the core spaces. So you'd have your gymnasium, your cafeteria, media center, and a common lobby that would allow access for the community, come and use all those spaces, and you'd be able to shut down the entire academic portion of the building and really compartmentalize the building really nicely from a security standpoint. So as you approach the building, another safety concern that we had discussed was clearly separating the bus loop from the parent loop. With an elementary school, we've seen patterns at the other 3. We have a lot of parent pickup and drop off. So we're trying to extend the queue as much as possible. So bringing those cars in deep into the site and then providing them hundreds of feet of stacking so that it kind of gets them out of the way, organizes and regularizes all of the pickup and drop off. So you can see we're proposing the bus loop to come in over by the core space, and we can stack 10 or 11 buses in that loop, clearly get them off of the main access point. We did talk to some traffic engineers. We're looking at potentially doing a dedicated bus lane, which would actually be a 3rd lane that would be striped, so the buses could actually bypass the parent loop if it started getting backed up, and they could come right into that loop, stack, and then easily get back out. So by drawing the parents deeper into the site, we could actually loop them around the back lot as well and extend that even farther if we needed to. So we're trying to also disperse the parking. So staff at the front, any kind of overflow would be pushed to the back of the building for big events or any additional people that would be there. And we're trying to break the parking areas down so we can deal with drainage issues and things like that. So I think the general organization of the building fits really well with the site. And I think for us, it kind of reconfirmed that you can be very comfortable moving forward with this site and some further development.
Thanks, Jim. And as Jim had noted, the SLR team did take a look at the on-site utilities to make sure that could be accommodated based on SLAM's design. So they had located the septic system to the north of the building, where there's some lower grades, as well as 2 potential locations for wells that would need to be confirmed with some soil testing as part of the next phase. They provided some guidance on well separation, noting 100-foot offsets from property lines, any septic systems, as well as underground stormwater. And then they also noted the need for fire suppression tanks, which would be located likely underground somewhere on the site for storage for emergency purposes. And Kemp, you want to talk through the
Sure.
operational
Yep.
process?
So part of our process was to develop a cost model for each of the scenarios, phase 1, 2, and 3. First one being the new construction, taking into consideration everything you've just heard as far as site organization, a raw land site that would need to be cleared. You have a wetland crossing, so there's some engineering involved with that, as well as a new well, septic system, and on-site storage for sprinkler systems for the building. All of that was taken into consideration, as well as recent bidding data from projects that we've done as a firm in southwestern Connecticut. Most recently, about 6 months ago, we bid a project in Greenwich. So that data influenced this cost model, as well as our completed project in Darien, the Oxbridge project, among others. And so we developed that model, and we anticipate a construction cost of a range from about $71 to $78 million. We've anticipated soft costs, which include, all of your A&E fees and other fees and FF&E and so forth for the new building, of a range of 17 to 19 million. And then part of the model also includes escalation of a range of 10 to 12 million. So for a total range project cost of anywhere from 98 to 109 million for this project. And then we further broke it down based on what we know today for what the state might reimburse as eligible component for that. And so we see that range breaking down with, on the low end of the range, perhaps 90 million for the town share, with about an $8 million contribution from the state. And then on the high end of the range, 100 million town share, with about 9 million from the state.
Thanks, Kemp. So obviously, if you were to build a new elementary school, one of the tasks you would have to undertake is creating attendance zones for that. It's obviously too soon at this point in the game to do that exercise, but we recognize it is an important part of the plan. We do see some benefits to having that fourth school and filling in the missing quadrant. It provides an elementary school for students living in the northern part of town. We know those students have long bus rides to east and west today. And in terms of establishing that process, that would likely, we always recommend that the attendance zones are finalized 12 months prior to them going into effect. So we would look at the attendance zones being finalized in the fall of 2029 to be implemented in the fall of 2030. That way you're using the most recent enrollment here. So upon completion of phase one, we would then enter into phase two of the project. And this is one where our scope did not entail us doing a detailed facility condition assessment of your existing schools, but we think that is a next step for you to undertake, to really take a look at the building's not only condition and infrastructure, but also look at the educational program and what changes you may need to make to align those with the way that you educate your students today. As part of the new school project, you need to define the educational program and educational specifications. So we think that those specifications can really serve as a model for the other three buildings. It really becomes the standard to which you're going to renovate them to. So we are undertaking, the alterations to existing facilities for a range of reasons. Obviously, the educational program, condition, and then also to create parity between the existing schools and the new schools. We are proposing, based on our schedule, that this project would begin in the summer of 2030. That way students can move to the new North School, and there's fewer students in the existing schools, so less disruption, obviously, when you're undertaking a project of this size. We feel that concurrent alterations and renovations would condense the schedule, which is assumed in our cost model that Kemp will walk us through. We also are suggesting that the district maintain the K-4 alignment until the alterations are completed. Again, fewer students in the building means less headaches, and also there's going to be more spaces that are unoccupied to make the project go more quickly. And then once the renovations and alterations are complete, then the district would move to that K-5 alignment. And then we're also flagging the potential to swing pre-K to another site to facilitate the construction at West. So potentially leveraging the extra classroom space at North once that's completed.
So we took the same approach on phase two for the cost modeling, and you'll see the same structure here where we have construction costs, soft costs, and escalation for a total estimated project cost range. You'll also note that the range is fairly sizable because it kind of reflects the uncertainty of what we don't know today. The lower end of the range represents an alterations approach because you have taken good care of your buildings. So there are some buildings with some recently new roofs and other boiler replacements and so forth. So until we do that detailed facility condition assessment and understand each building in a detailed way and what is necessary across all of those buildings, you're going to see a pretty wide range, but that will narrow pretty quickly once we understand what each building needs. So you'll see anywhere from about $25 to $65 million for each one of these projects. I'm rounding a little bit. And again, a share from the state from anywhere from $4 to $10 million for each of those projects at this point in time is what we foresee.
The third phase would be to reconfigure and retrofit SACs. So once the elementary school projects are completed, fifth grade would move out of SACs into the 4 elementary schools, and then that would allow that lower level space at SACs to be retrofitted. Sixth grade would move upstairs to the current fifth grade wing, and the lower and upper division offices would be consolidated. And then those lower level spaces would be retrofitted into at least 6 pre-K classrooms. That's what's in our cost model, but we also have some opportunity to expand that if desired by the district. And have those support spaces that are lacking for that pre-K program today. We recognize there's gonna be the need for some reconfiguration of site elements, pre-K drop-off, having a dedicated entrance that's separated from the middle school entry, as well as playgrounds, and then outfitting the lower division office into district-wide central office space. And I'll let Jim talk through the concept plan.
Yeah, as Pat mentioned, we anticipate being able to renovate that middle lower portion into 6 pre-K classrooms, and then the associated necessitated bathrooms and toilets, as well as the dedicated entry. So you can see on the far left-hand side, we anticipate doing a dedicated pre-K entry, so you have that security point. The pre-K pickup drop-off is a much different process. So I think pushing it to that side of the building and using the little bump out that's existing out there and creating a vestibule, a secure vestibule, reworking the parking area to facilitate easy pickup drop-off, some additional parking spaces that would be signed for exactly that, pickup drop-off, very short term. We think that this works out really well. I think the square footage is pretty much spot on for what you would need programmatically to accommodate that pre-K in the lower wing. And there is a little extra space. So the gray area that we're looking at just above that star, the dedicated entry, could potentially fit 2 more pre-Ks with some minor renovation in the future. So our costing exercise did not assign any dollars to renovate that currently, but you know that you do have a little extra space if that pre-K program wants to expand in the near future. And then on the far right-hand side where it's labeled central office, that's about 11,000 square feet. We could gut that area and fully renovate that for the central office and reuse the existing entry that's there.
And again, same process with the cost modeling. The column with the red square around it represents the sum of the 2 columns to the right. The middle column being the amount for the pre-K component, where we see about a $13 to $14 million project. And then the far right column would be the central office component, where we see about $8 to $9 million worth of work there. And across those 2 components, we see a possible contribution of about $3 million from the state. And then this slide is a summary slide of all of the projects combined, just so you can get the bigger picture. You can see the lines on the far left. We start at the top of the new construction project, and then 2, 3, and 4 are the modifications to south, west, and east, and then 5 and 6 are the SACS pre-K and the SACS administrative offices, all kind of looking at one page. And we anticipate, the total range for all of those projects across the whole program, ranging from about 194 million to could be as high as 328, but we think that that's a high-end range. And one thing I didn't mention when I talked about the range on the elementary schools was that the low end of the range was a bit of an alteration approach, whereas the high end of the range could represent a full renovation of each of those buildings. And I think that's an important thing to understand, because renovation has a specific statutory definition at the state level, where they expect the building to be as new for the next 20 years. And that's an important thing to understand, whereas an alterations approach addresses programmatic changes and needs for, say, deferred maintenance items and so forth.
So to kind of cap off, why are we recommending this plan? This fulfills the longstanding goal of moving to the K-5, 6, 8 grade configuration, creates a 4th elementary school in the northern part of town, addresses capacity, condition, and educational programming needs at the elementary schools, decreases the enrollment in the elementary schools and the middle schools, resulting in smaller learning environments for students, provides purpose-built space for pre-K, and gives you opportunities to expand that program in the future. And with recent investments in many of your peer districts, this really maintains your advantage as a premier community and your longstanding commitment to high-quality education and facilities. And we have just kind of a summary of next steps. I won't go through all these today, but we felt it was important to, especially knowing this is going to be kind of a continuous process, especially for phase 1. Once we get concurrence from the board, kind of moving forwards towards that grant application. We're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the work and the diligence. So it appears, and I think it's no surprise to any of us and most parents that our schools are already kind of bursting at the seams. But one of the questions that we often get in the community, or at least I often get in the community, is just how realistic are these and I mentioned to this to you guys the other day, how realistic are these projections? We did have other projections that NASDAQ provided us, which had much, much higher growth expectations than yours. Yours seem to be far lower, but still showing us, essentially more than outgrowing what we have already. And it's interesting to see, I'd forgotten that piece, that our schools were already too small by current standards. The property is too small, the schools themselves, so we're already too small as it is. Can you maybe explain to everybody what the methodology you used for the population growth and versus what some others might use?
Sure. So I think the major difference is how we forecast our kindergarten enrollment. Some of our competitors, they basically take the historic ratio of kindergarten enrollment to births 5 years ago. And regardless of whether you have a lot of births or a few births, they apply the same number. We did a detailed analysis going all the way back, I think, to 2006, Mike, where we looked at the number of births compared to the number of kindergartners. We had a spike in births in New Canaan in 2021, 22, and 23, I believe. Those are likely to result in larger kindergarten classes, but not if we apply that same ratio as when births were 25% lower. If we look back to the early 2000s, you had many years where births were higher than the last couple of years, but you rarely had kindergarten classes exceeding 300 students. So it kind of provides some historical precedent for our numbers. We know you're largely built out. We know there's some development going on, but in communities like New Canaan, where for all intents and purposes, there's very little land left to support new development. We think that our more conservative approach is going to be more likely than for our kindergarten classes that are 25% bigger than you've ever seen.
Thank you.
And also, I think one of the things that we do that's a little different is that we also account for the housing in town. So having that conversation with the planning department, looking at what the zoning commission, planning and zoning commission is approving, or some of those projects that got caught up in some litigation. I did read recently that one of them now is going to move forward. That's something that you'd want to be able to get a grasp on. I know it was one of the things that we didn't add until it was actually approved and sort of out of litigation. But we do a very detailed housing analysis, so we're adding students into that baseline projection locally for those new developments that don't get captured in some of the prior demographic studies.
Thank you. That was a follow-up question, because that was pretty recent, so I want to clarify that these projections do not yet include the expectation, or they do? The expectation for the Weed Street, which is what you're referring to.
I've been tracking that project, and
Yeah.
I think I read recently that it now may move forward.
Yeah.
So that's something that it was not built into the number.
Right.
And I had it off to the side until we saw what the courts would say. So that should probably get added back in.
Okay, so it's not in these, I guess.
It's not in that number,
That's what I
correct.
wanted to clarify. Okay. Thank you. And our schools were built when, these elementary schools? I know they were renovated in 97. And it sounds like they're, the state's requirement for a renovation is for them to be like new for 20 years. Now they're 30 years from when they were renovated. When were they built?
50s and 60s.
Yeah,
50s and 60s? I mean, so at a minimum, it sounds like we're due for an actual renovation.
And I think
Right.
that's kind of a, part of the decision-making, right? It's
Right.
it was 30 years since they were built when you renovated them, 30 years since the last renovation.
Right.
To make a sizable change like switching grade configuration, right? It's like, time is ripe to look at that now, because,
We're going to be in there spending the money anyway to renovate.
Yep.
Yeah.
We've done a great job of keeping them up, which we know. And credit to the administration for paying attention and spreading the costs out over time. But it sounds like we're due for an overhaul.
yeah, and it looked like that renovation in the late 90s, I think it was 97, was an attempt to bring parity across all three schools as well. So it wasn't only condition, it was to ensure that each building had the same elements programmatically.
And you mentioned earlier that a number of the towns around us in our district, our DIRG, are also, we know, we've heard Darien and Westport. Like, can you give us an idea for what, right around what these towns are, like how much they're investing and where that's going and what types of projects at a high level?
Sure, I can at least give you a sense of what Darien has recently done. The new Oxbridge project was a $65 million project, and then they, after that project, they invested another 95, I believe it was, into their other 3 elementary schools, so about 33 per school. And then I've heard recently that I think they're contemplating another project at the middle school, but I don't know the details on that.
Okay.
And then Camp Long Lots in Westport, which is under design, soon to be construction, was just north of 100 million. I think it was 103 million for that elementary school.
And that's renovation.
That's new
It's a
construction.
brand new.
Yeah.
Kemp, you mentioned Greenwich as well.
Correct. Greenwich, about 10 years ago, put up a new Lebanon elementary school, and the project I mentioned earlier that we just bid 6 months ago is a new middle school for the Central Middle School.
Thank you. Other questions, comments? Campbell, please.
Thank you very much. This is very helpful. A couple of things, I guess, starting with the new North School. This is still subject to soil testing, correct?
Yeah, so for the utilities, you would want to get in and do soil testing to verify it. I know based on the soil mapping that our engineers looked at, they didn't see any red flags, but of course, you want to do the soil testing before finalizing.
Okay, no, I was just wondering, it seems like it's pretty tight with some of the septics and things like that. I don't know is there enough space, I guess, for alterations, right? If modifications need to be made for soil, I mean, it seems like it's pretty tight in here, given wetlands, but do we have enough room are you confident there's enough room to make modifications if needed?
Yeah, we think there's adequate room. Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, I think the way that we've located the building, we can actually slide the building a little farther south if we need more room on the downslope, the north side for septic field. But yeah, I'd be curious to see what the soil samples come back as. But yeah, all indications right now are thumbs up. I think you're in pretty good shape on that site.
Yeah, great. And given surrounded by residential areas, and if you think about, we're adding, a lot of non-permeable surfaces, right? Drainage, how is that, especially given where we are in town, it's not like it's going to feed into any sort of town sewer or anything like that. I mean, how do we account for that and ensure that there's no disruption for the surrounding residents?
Yeah, so great question. Stormwater detention would be a really important part of the design process. So we know, obviously, we have to maintain some separation with the well, with underground detention for stormwater, but I know most designs, the focus is retention and on-site, so that we're not creating problems for neighbors. We also recognize we're going to have to go through zoning approval, obviously, for this project, where they're going to have to do that detailed study with the civil engineer, answer those questions. I believe it's a special permit, so a discretionary permit, where you have to make sure that all those questions are answered in order for it to move forward.
Great.
And I think we were really intentional in trying to keep 3 separate parking lots, breaking it down into as small a scale as we possibly can. And, most of our schools recently are designs. We've been incorporating rain gardens and things like that. So we'll obviously work with town staff to try to meet all the regulations, obviously.
Is it permissible to collect the rainwater and use on site? I mean, is that, I know some towns and states don't allow for that, rainwater collection. I mean, if we wanted to use that for irrigation and the like, would use the runoff from the existing site?
You can certainly do that, yes. Oftentimes it will require a secondary plumbing system,
Yeah.
but it's absolutely possible.
And is there space for that? I mean, again, that would minimize any sort of drainage to the neighboring residences, right?
Right, I think it would be part of the detention system, the stormwater detention system, and then what you do with that detained water is up to you. You know, you can either just let it infiltrate into the ground, and, you know, the requirements are gonna be a net zero runoff on the site, so that's gonna be the design parameter. Then how we manage that, it would be, given the amount of surface program elements that need to go on the site with the parking, the drive aisles, playgrounds, play fields, so forth, it's most likely going to be underground detention, which is pretty typical.
And the buffer size here, I don't know if I saw that. What's the buffer between the neighboring areas? You mentioned there's a buffer.
Yeah, there's a 50-foot landscape buffer.
50 foot, okay. And then, I'm sorry, I've got a few questions here. One other thing, a couple other things. When you look at sort of the schedule of enrollment, right, and that increasing beyond capacity, and if you look at the timeline for construction, it seems that phase one wouldn't be complete until we're already past sort of the thick of the, so we've already peaked or sort of at the peak, especially if there's a delay. We'll already sort of we'll be through that, the toughest part, the most challenging part. I mean, are there other alternatives that could sort of address our needs sooner? I mean, would flipping phase two and phase one, would that make more sense to address the needs in the near term?
So the challenge with doing phase two first is that by doing phase one first, it
Freeze capacity.
it frees up, yeah, the student population is going to be smaller for phase two that you're designing to in the existing 3 elementary schools versus if you kept K forward, kept the bigger buildings, you would likely need to add space to those facilities to accommodate it. I know many of the other communities we work in, a great point that you brought up, because the short-term and long-term decision-making need to line up with one another. Westport added portables to the old long lots to kind of hold them over for a few years until construction was completed. Other districts just would rather take the operational approach of saying, all right, we're going to bite the bullet and say, Art's going to go on a cart for a year, or maybe have specialists doubled up in a room. So those are really the two options. Obviously, one has a higher cost than the other, but it's really temporary until the major project is completed.
Okay. And so, and I guess as you think about phase two, and again, correct me, I don't know, one question is the dollars. We're talking about projects that will start, 5 or 6 years, 8 years from now. Are these in today's dollars, or are these projected for, adjusted for?
These costs are escalated for the timeline of the project. So the schedule slide that you saw has, each project has escalation built into the midpoint of construction.
Okay. And so if you think about going the complete renovation route for, to Hugo's point, these are very old buildings, right? Even though they're 30 years since the renovation, what would be the incremental cost if we were to undertake a new build at the existing elementary schools, right? Because, right now we're looking at $65 million all in. I'm assuming there's some savings to be had with site development and infrastructure that's already in place that we could use. And then as I compare that to the cost of the North School, what would be, again, thinking about sort of the long-term approach and sort of the sustainability of these renovations, what would be the incremental cost if we were to build a new South School or West School?
So the challenge becomes the sites themselves. There's not land on those sites to support new construction except where the building is today. And you don't have swing space to move students to temporarily to facilitate that. So I think that's the big limiting factor to building new on any of those sites, is the land availability. Long lots, for example, in Westport, they have a much bigger site, so that allowed them to build a new school on the same property next to the old school while it remains operational. Your schools are not, or your sites are not large enough for that type of construction here.
Well, if you do it in the order that you propose, phase one, then phase two, wouldn't you be able to use North School as flex capacity?
You could.
You could use that as a swing space, but then you have one swing school that you're gonna try to swing all the construction projects through.
Every year, yeah.
So when you think about the timeline for that, it goes way out into the future.
My grandkids, go to this school.
Yep.
Understood. Thank you.
Dr. Letzi, two questions for you and then one for you all. Would this allow us to look at a possible two-tier system for start times?
You know, it would. I don't want to overpromise, but I think it would, because we could look at 6 through 12 on one tier, and then the 4 K through 5 buildings on one tier.
Okay.
And given the proximity of the North School to folks that live up north, it would really shorten those runs for kids, make that tighter, so we wouldn't need to be 45 minutes apart. You know, we could probably shorten that time between the tiers as well. It would be a much more efficient system and time-wise for kids that way.
And then what would happen with 220?
So with 220, what we would do ultimately, the end would be, the planning, far enough out where we'll see where we sort of, as we go. But the plan right now would be to leave the second floor, so we'd end that lease. And then the first floor would be half launch, and the other half would be the downtown campus for the alternative students. Because we're already squeezed for space with that downtown campus, and we're looking at some additional room for them. So when we left there, we would, it's a town-owned building, as you know, so we'd keep that space. Launch is all set. We'd have to do some very light work to get the, our offices ready for the alternative program, and they'd be right there, which is an ideal spot for them.
Thank you. And have you all tracked real estate values in areas like Ox Ridge, where they have a gorgeous new school? Can you talk about that some?
I can't speak to property values, but we can certainly talk about it from the enrollment standpoint. After Ox Ridge opened, we did see a big increase in migration into that particular attendance zone within Darien. So certainly there is a, if you build it, they will come element that we've seen in some of your peer communities. I don't have a dollar value, obviously, but clearly, folks who are moving to these communities are paying attention to, where the investments are being made.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Can you real quickly just explain why it's not feasible to build up at all? Because I know we're going to get some questions and people who understand that these are small sites going this way, but why can we not build up?
Sure. So when the buildings were first designed, they were designed for either a single-story construction or, in some cases, two-story construction. But when you design those footings and foundation systems and the structural steel systems for that, they are designed for that. To add to that vertically, you would have to have a pretty invasive, I'll call it a remediation program, because you'd have to increase size of footings, which means you have to tear up floors, get down to the footings, you have to probably reinforce the structural system. So going up is very difficult when you have an existing building.
Great. And second question, the facility condition assessment, how quickly, or I shouldn't say how quickly, how long does that take?
I'd say about 6 to 8 weeks.
Okay. Great. Thank you, guys.
Penny?
So we would want to assess the structure, so we want to make certain that if we were going to undertake this project, which, we have to do something, we want to make certain that we're setting up our schools for success for the next 30 to 40 years. So we would need to assess the spaces as well, and what alterations we might have to make to them.
Agreed. We would do that as part of the analysis. Structural grid, for example, on the building may not change, but wall partitions may change to accommodate programmatic needs.
Right, and then that would give you more of an idea about where we're going to be in that wide range for each of the elementary schools yet, because we just don't know what that's going to involve, that's the biggest unknown really in this project at this point. the new construction is a little bit easier to, you're less unknowns.
Correct.
Just while I have the floor, so when we're going forward then, if we're gonna, we would have, the next steps to me are to assess a little bit the three elementary schools we have, can we, make certain that they would be good, if we did all these renovations for the next, for 30, 40 years, like we just did with the police station, and then with the, and analyzing the North School with the idea, because that's an integral part of this, we would have to do the soil testing and the stormwater retention study, or what other studies would we have to do to make certain that that was going to be a possibility?
Yeah, so I think an important thing to add to that is just going to be defining the educational program. I think we've talked about it a lot. We know what it is, maybe conceptually, but we need to put it on paper and say, this is what we want to design to, right? I think we talked over this process about the 2 science labs, the 2 art rooms, the 2 music rooms, obviously special education and support services. So I think that needs to occur first, and then that becomes the lens with which you're looking at the existing 3 buildings from a space and configuration.
Yeah, and then in addition to the geotech investigation on the site, you'll also want to do a phase 1, which is required for a grant application anyway. So it's just an environmental screening of the site.
Environmental what?
You'll want to do a phase 1 ESA for the site, environmental screening, just to make sure that there weren't any past activities that can be traced back that could lead to something on the site that would be unfavorable.
Cool. Any other questions? Good. Thanks, guys.
I have one
Yeah, yeah.
maybe for Brian or whoever. When we think about the phase 3, I guess, and expanding sort of pre-K, how many more students would we be able to add and sort of expand that program? Is that part of this?
That is, we're currently running with 5 classrooms. This has 6 here. Those classes generally run at about a dozen kids, give or take, per classroom because of the needs. What we'd look to do if the special ed population remained the same, we would bring in more typical students. So just change that ratio. It has to be at least 50-50, but there's nothing that says it can't be 70-30, right? So we'd look to bring in more typicals, which is revenue generating as well. I think there's a need, right? And as the population is increasing, even if it's a gradual thing, but when the K population increases, that means a few years ago we had more youngins. So
Yeah.
I think it's being responsive to that.
Perfect.
Yeah, Laura.
Hi, thank you so much for all this information. I just want to make sure I understand. So the North School, it'll run at the same capacity planning as the current 3 elementary schools that we have right now?
Yep, the goal would be to have them all be in that 470 to 500 student range.
Okay, and so I'm just looking, if our peer averages right now are 408 and we're targeting 470 and we're already above the 95. I mean, I'm really trusting that I'm not understanding, like, are we still feeling comfortable that we're then 90% for all 4 new schools?
When you're designing, it's an opportunity to build some flexibility into the program, right? So when you're designing a school, you're never going to design it to be at 100% capacity when it
Right.
opens, right? So I think it's a great opportunity to provide some buffer space that you don't have now, so that if you do have an enrollment increase in a particular school, maybe you have an extra. I know Long Lots had some flex class, like 1 or 2 flex classrooms built into their program that weren't defined, but they're there because they know that one year they might need a 5th or a 6th kindergarten teacher. So.
Address the bubble or something.
I think Laura,
I hear Lara's question is the opposite.
Correct.
Are they large enough?
right.
Are we building
Yes.
enough capacity? Am I right?
Bigger, go bigger.
No, I'm not going bigger. I'm just, I
Share the
guess
source.
I'm just asking, like,
Yeah.
if we're comparing this to our peers, so our target is still roughly 60 students larger than our peers, correct?
By building.
Yeah.
By
Correct.
It is.
And but that will put us back into the 90 to 95% target range?
The facilities would be designed, you'd have some buffer space on top of the 470 to 500 students.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
that wouldn't be like the max, that would be kind of the ideal that you're.
The idea, okay.
And you're allowed to design to the peak projected 8-year enrollment, so As we talked earlier about the enrollment going up, about 140 at the elementary schools, that becomes the new target. And then you put your 10% buffer on top of that. And your reimbursement rate is so low with the state. If you want to build a slightly different program than what they pay for, i.e. if you want to build some buffer space in and some extra classrooms, you don't have to, technically hit the eligibility factor 1-to-1. You would just lower your share of reimbursement from the state. If you're a community that gets 80%, that's a very large number, versus what you get from New Canaan. It's not a very large number to take a little bit of a reimbursement hit when you really think about how often you build a new school. You should build what you need for as long as you could see out into the future.
Understood. Thank you.
I have a question about that. That just reminded me of something. Our existing elementary schools, they don't meet the state recommended criteria, right? Given sort of the size and must be at least 10 acres, you said, and another 10 acres for every 100 students?
It's a guideline, so they
Guideline.
recognize that in some communities you may not be able to find a site that big, but that's for new schools, yes. That
Okay, so that wouldn't disqualify us either from any sort of assistance with the renovation, or
It would
even
not.
if we wanted to build in the future, if we determined that it was more economical and it just made better long-term sense to rebuild, let's say, West School, right? Are we grandfathered in? Would we be able to use that same lot to build a new school?
West is a little bit of a trickier example because it's the one with the septic system there, that's quite old. So that becomes a little bit of a trickier example, but yeah, you would be able to build adjacent to the school rather than renovate, and the state makes you go through a process where you have to weigh the cost of a renovation versus the cost of new construction. We would recommend that you do that anyway to see what would be the more cost-effective option, especially if there's some challenges in the floor plan to really kind of retrofit the building. I think one of the things that we didn't emphasize was the look that the SLAM team did at each of the elementary schools to add space on. They ran through various iterations of looking at ways to be able to add additional space to each of those buildings in order to make them a K-5 school. And it's not just the sheer size of the site itself, it's some of the site elements, it's the topography, and it's also the way the buildings have evolved over time. You have circulation right up against some core spaces. You don't have a lot of low-hanging fruit to add space without some drawbacks across the board to each of the buildings. So it's the size, but also the building orientation and the sites themselves that are creating a little bit of a challenge.
Okay, and I'm assuming there's environmental concern hazards like asbestos, given the ages of these schools, that need to be mitigated with this disruption of renovation?
Yes, we believe so. There are existing AHERA reports that we've analyzed and that you're, I'm sure, aware of, and that would need to be remediated.
Right.
I would
Each
think-
school has an asbestos management plan that we check on regularly and keep up with, so it's known, but it's there.
Is there, yeah, perfect.
Right,
Thank you
but
very much.
I think Mike's point about when you do a feasibility study for renovation, if you want to go down that path, or even an alteration for that matter, we would look at what the cost for new would be, because the state would require that. Because they're not going to reimburse a project to renovate an old building that's going to cost more than it would cost to build a new building.
Yeah.
So they're very much interested in what that equation looks like.
So either way, we'll have that decision in the future to make.
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Any other questions? All right. Well, Julie, thanks for finding $1 million for us. It's a start. Thanks, guys. It's been, yeah, maybe boosters, some lemonade sales, maybe cupcake sales. Guys, super helpful. Thank you. Really, thanks for the work and great presentation. Thank you very much.
Great.
All right, got a couple action items. Oh, this one's always a fun one. A donation. Motion to accept, a donation from the New Canaan Rams All Sports Booster Club in the amount of $7,000 to support a new scoreboard at Dunning Stadium.
Yes, so very self-explanatory. As you know, the town picked up the vast majority of the bill on this with an understanding that we'd get some help from both the PFA and the All Sports Booster Club. So this is $7,000 towards that project, which is going to make a significant difference for us on that field 12 months a year. So we're excited to get it through. And we are incredibly grateful to our All Sports Booster Club, who continues to be just a world-class partner for our students and our programs.
That's great. Thank you. Can I get a motion to accept the donation from the New Canaan Rams All Sports Booster Club in the amount of $7,000 for the scoreboard? Phil, second. Laura, all in favor? Excellent. Thank you.
I'll also just share that we received $4,000 from the PFA, that because it's under the 5,000 threshold, the board doesn't have to approve it. But with that 7 and that 4, we now have what we need and can finish the project.
Wonderful.
Special
Thank you.
thanks to both.
All right, moving on to the 2025-2026 district goals, which it looks like, Dr. Lutzy, you guys have had provided us with a red line version as well, which is super helpful.
Exactly, and I apologize for the blue. I used 2 different computers, and you know how that works. But thanks to the cabinet who've been looking at and making adjustments as well. As we typically do, and you know, this is a first and second reading. So we'll go through briefly tonight and then look forward to further conversation later. And what we'll look to do with the board is to find a date perhaps for a workshop where we can both discuss the presentation from SLAM and next steps around that, and also follow up on district goals between now and the second vote so we can have conversation about that. As you know, we have 5 goals that are, although they're not in order of priority here, we do keep them in the same order just for ease of reference. And at the high level, our 5 goals are our student learning goal, our communications goal, our teacher quality TEPL goal, our school climate and safety goal, and then our stewardship goal. And what we'll do is just hit a couple of the changes, if that works for you. And then you're welcome to take it and we can talk. And if there are any specific questions, reach out to me and we'll continue the conversation elsewhere. Dr. Kennedy, would you like to hit a couple of the high points from goal 1?
Sure. So you'll see that objective 1 has remained the same. We still obviously want to look at our district curriculum, instruction, and assessments and make sure that we're meeting all the local, state, and national standards. Where you start to see some of the changes is as we move into objective number 2, where we're really looking at the portrait of the graduate work. And certainly it's once again to continue to ensure the knowledge, skills, and dispositions identified in our portrait of the graduate. I think it's also important to note that, you know, we're now going to be asking our seniors to do the reflection on those dispositions. And so we have made the shift, we have created a rubric, and so we'll be rolling that out next year with all of the high school students, and then certainly rolling that out K-12. And then certainly the last one is really to examine the SAC schedules to identify opportunities for future improvements. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we get into one of the other objectives. In objective number 3, I think we've mastered our NGSS curriculum writing at this point. We've seen the integration K-12. We'll continue to closely monitor those standards, make sure that we adjust accordingly. But I think we're in a really good place where you're going to start to see the shift. We talked a little bit about that when I was talking about assessments, is with social studies. So it's really taking a look at the new state standards that have come out in social studies and really make sure that we do that crosswalk to see where we are with our curriculum, where we are with those new standards. And then a lot of it is really just, you know, adjusting our curriculum accordingly. We've already started to make some minor tweaks in our K-8, but we'll continue to really take a close look at that to make sure that we're addressing those. We're moving forward with our vision on innovation. Obviously, we want to continue with our steering committee and our building-based committees to really help provide some guidance for integrating our innovation. We had a wonderful last meeting in the springtime where we brought in some people in the workforce who really spent some time talking with all of us about innovation and what it means for our future students graduating. And it talked a lot about the integration of AI as well. So it was really exciting. We did record it, so hopefully we'll be able to get some little clips of that as we move into some presentations on innovation. We really want to finalize the K through 12 design thinking model for the district. Remember, we piloted it this year. We really took a close look at it. We're now ready to finalize it and bring that forward to the steering committee. And obviously continue to utilize the trainer model when we're talking about the dome. And we've really expanded our curricular units for all students to experience the dome in a variety of disciplines. And certainly the new software that we'll be bringing in next year for the dome will really help to increase that. And I don't want to have any spoiler alerts, but we will have a dome presentation hopefully at the end of the summer. So they'll be able to really give you an update of what has occurred throughout the course of the year, where we're going for the future, and it really is truly amazing. It's hard to believe that it's only been in existence and in operation for a year. So they've really taken off, and it's really amazing. As we move into goal number 5, this is really those technological knowledge skills to succeed in that dynamic and complex global society. So you're really going to see that we're hitting hard with the really training our teachers on the implementation of innovation, really moving forward with those transformational practices, and really to expand the opportunities in grades 7 through 12 to utilize AI as a tool to support the learning. It was something that we heard certainly in our spring innovation meeting, but it is something that, we have Magic School AI that we're going to continue with next year, which is approved, data privacy approved, and so now it's at a point where we really need to expand that. So we're looking forward to August. We're going to do like a gallery walk with our high school staff as part of professional learning to see all the ways that they've explored the AI during that short pilot period. And then how can we continue to keep moving that forward and really utilizing AI as a tool. As we move into D, that's the review, the implementation of the newly developed computer science units in grades K4 and adjust accordingly. So we have done some work with those computer science units. And remember that computer science really has those 5 different standards, because there's obviously the computing systems, there's the network and the internet, there's the data analysis, there's the algorithms and programming, which is all about the coding, and then the impact of computing, which is really about the social media. So when you really look at those 5 standards, it really is a wide spread of how we go about integrating those computer standards within our classrooms. And certainly at the elementary school, it's easier when you have special areas where they go and they have technology, and you go and they have libraries. So it's easier to integrate some of those right into that. Where some of our challenges are is really continuing to explore where we're going to go with those assured experiences in grades 6 through 8. And we really need to look deeply at the schedule, because the schedule does play an impact. There's only so much time in the day that we have to try to create those assured experiences. So how can we develop those opportunities for all of our students to be able to be exposed to, a Shark Tank, or to be exposed to all the different STEM rooms that we have at the middle school. So it's not just certain groups of students that are taking opportunities in those areas. And then obviously we want to continue to implement and monitor the phone-free classrooms at the initiative that we've taken at the middle school and certainly here at the high school. I think that's it for me, and then you move into, we'll continue the RTI goal, with the pages here. So we didn't make any changes to RTI. It's important that we continue to make sure that we're meeting all the needs of the students within the district here.
That's great. And I'll briefly mention goal 2, and then, sorry, Dr. Kennedy, we'll go back to you for goal 3. Yep. So goal 2 is our communications goal, where we understand that the quality of our communication is foundational to our students, our community, our staff, as we all know. So the only change here is the incorporation of social media into objective 2, which is to promote, continue to develop, and further the utilization of district building and departmental websites and social media. Michelle Schneider is quite a bit on Instagram, And that is a powerful communications tool for us both to get out information about things happening in the district, calendars, schedules, others. We do have an app through our website also that we encourage people to download, but it's yet another app on people's phones, so we know that that's something they're not that likely to go to all the time. So we use Instagram. We go where the people are and try to put high interest things out there, and it seems to be working very well. And it's carefully curated at all levels before it's being published. Others, as you'll recall, we added a year or two ago about the number 5, together with the Board of Ed, advocating for the needs of New Canaan students at the local, state, national level. And we'll continue to do that with breakfasts with our representatives, with other work that we've been doing, and we'll continue those initiatives in the next year too. So that's our communications. Dr. Krenti, we had a couple of little changes for goal 3,
Just some minor changes in objective 1. We're going to continue to move forward with our teacher evaluation and professional learning evaluation system, as well as our leaders evaluation and professional learning. So we got the approval from the State Department of Ed. So now we're ready to continue to keep monitoring and moving forward and really focusing in on that coaching domain, and certainly continuing to measure the effectiveness of those classroom coach and math coach positions. Darlene might want to talk a little bit about recruiting.
Yeah, so objective 2, the only changes that we have there are, we did have some dialogue around the UConn teacher residency program that we did participate in last year, and reviewed also along with that the Sacred Heart University program that's very similar, but met our needs in a much better way. So we're going to be going with that this year, and we've already secured the interns for that. Everything else remains the same, and E, under objective 2, we actually did finalize our plan for increasing educator diversity. Our committees met over the course of this year, and we'll be doing a final report that's due in August to the state.
Great. Goal 4 is a healthy environment that fosters respect, ethical behavior, and responsible local, national, and global citizenship. The significant changes here are under D. What used to say develop and implement action plans based on the results of the most recent school climate survey now says to administer school climate surveys to children in grades 3 through 12, along with parents and faculty staff. Every other year, we either administer or we act upon the results of that. So we'll be developing that survey, sharing it with the board prior to it being implemented, and going through and following that protocol there. The second on the bottom is we know already some of the topics that we're going to be presenting for our parents and their community this year in the fall and the spring. So we wanted to be more specific than just say offer parent education. So it's a variety of topics, including the impacts of social media. We have a speaker lined up for that. Promoting independence. We have a speaker lined up for that in the fall. Planning for life after high school is also lined up, and other high-interest topics. That's both because we know what the topics are, and because speakers are in such demand now, we have to lock them in well in advance. So we've got the information together, we've gotten the funding together, and we'll get those on the calendar very quickly, very soon. That's, well, in goal 3, if you, this goal 4, if you go to the third objective, under D, it's the monitoring the implementation of the Sandy Hook Promise. And the only change there is after having it for a couple of years, we've made the decision that 6th grade is a bit too young for that system, at least in our setup. Because it's an anonymous reporting system, it's the purpose that it serves, the way that it's used. So we're really going to focus on 7 through 12 instead of 6 through 12. We feel that's it's just more age appropriate. And we've been looking and monitoring the comments and feedback and all, and data supports that that's the right move for us. And then the last one there, which is E, is brand new, and that's the implementation of the newly installed public address system here at the high school. As you know, it includes classroom audio enhancement, it's PA announcements and customization of that, it's live language translation, which we'll learn more about as we go. But most importantly, why it's in this goal 4 is that it is emergency alerting and communications. So it's on-site, in location, for emergency alerts, which may actually provide us with some grant opportunities. So we're pursuing that with Greg Riley in the town and the state to see if we can get some funding reimbursement for that. So we're excited about that new system, new program, and they're well underway already. They're running the lines and doing some of the installations and things, and by the start of the school year, we should be able to demonstrate what we're talking about, how it all works. Okay. And then on goal 5, which is our stewardship goal, Sean, feel free to jump in if you like, but I removed number 4 because we've been looking at facility studies. It's what we just did, right? And we've continued to do this work. So instead, I sort of adjusted the next objective a little bit, which is in light of anticipated enrollment increases, identify and begin implementation of a solution to accommodate additional students while simultaneously improving the facilities and educational experience for all. So that's the goal here is we've been looking at the problem, we've been talking about the problem, and now it's time to start implementing some solutions. So to get that going. And then if we look at the bottom, number 6 is to continue our successful composting solution that we put in place at South this year. We just started it in the last third or so of the school year. Matt Kaskak's a great leader in this. He's been doing quite a bit of research and doing a great job. We're going to continue that in the fall, and if all goes well, we're going to look at ways that we can expand it to the other schools as well. And that's composting out of the cafeterias right in the moment. And then 7 and 8 are 2 things that we started last year that we're going to continue to benefit from and implement, which is one is to the propane rebates for our bus fuel, and Sean has the exact information about that. You want to talk about each of these, Sean?
Sure. It's a program we started, and it's been very successful. Reduces our propane cost to 69 cents a gallon. We're contracted with Mitchell for $1.19 a gallon, and then with this rebate, it brings it down to 50 cents to 69 cents a gallon, which is tremendous. And then the other one we added was, utilizing the E-rate program with the federal government that will yield a 40% discount to certain technology purchases. And that could be a substantial amount of money too.
So if it's all right with the board, we're happy to take questions, but it might be best to schedule another opportunity, workshop or otherwise, for us to sit together and talk through after you've had a chance. I know you're only seeing them now for the first time, but we're certainly happy to answer any questions if you like.
Oh, we're good. Questions? We're good right now? All right, thank you. Can I get a motion to approve as a first reading the 2025-2026 district goals and objectives? Phil, second. Julie? And that's it.
That's right.
Next up, the 2026 BOE meeting schedule.
Yep. We like to have the whole year mapped out. We think it's the best way to put the schedule together, so I wanted you to take a look at it. Again, it's right here in front of you. Won't belabor the point. Just a first read, take a look. We can line it up with calendars. As we have in the past, we put multiple dates in the summer with the anticipation at least one of them isn't going to work. But we also like to schedule the review, the workshop, other things, because then we have them in the calendar and they don't become special meetings, and that gives us just a little more flexibility in the meeting if needed for changing the agenda or anything like that. But it's just for a first read now, and we can take a look, share your feedback, any concerns, and we can take it up next meeting.
Excellent, thank you. Can I get a motion to approve as a first reading the BOE calendar meetings for 2026? Motion Laura, second Julie. Thank you. And then next, comments from the public. Seeing there's nobody here. Announcements and future business, please.
Yes, it's hard to believe that tomorrow is the middle of July. Waiting for summer to really feel like it started, and I hope it doesn't wait much longer. We've been very busy, doing a lot, as you heard from Darlene and others. I believe the board's aware, but just so everyone is on the same page, the trial just wrapped up at Stanford Superior Court with the food services. So as you know, there were 3 people who were charged with the theft from cash from the cafeteria. 2 of them pled guilty and bargained out. The third, the cafeteria manager, Bruce Gluck, didn't, and so he's been going through trial. It concluded on Friday. We're anticipating a verdict sometime this week. So once we know that verdict, we'll let you know. But so far, both Marie Wilson and Joanne Pasquarelli from the high school cafeteria and the middle school cafeteria pled guilty to stealing money from the New Canaan Public Schools from our cafeterias. So I've been talking with the first selectman and a few others, and we'll talk about next step, maybe civil court to recoup damages through the pensions that they had been contributing to as employees here. Okay? So we'll stay tuned on that, but I'll let you know once the jury comes back and the verdict. The summer programs have gone very well throughout the building, as well as our capital projects. You know, Scott Olson and his team continue to get the things done that we need to have done across all of our buildings and keep up with all of it. We had a great message from Ian McHugh, our technology manager, that all of the orders that were placed, he was right on top of it, got out early, and all of our technology has come in. So instead of running around in the 11th hour before school starts trying to get everything in place, we really are confident that we're going to be ready for the startup. He's got everything in hand. And Elmer has been working throughout the summer already, working on refining the routes and putting it into a new system that we're going to be using in order to do some optimization and look to improve wherever we can for saving some students some time, getting kids back and forth to school a little bit more quickly, and maybe even saving a little bit of money. So we're taking a look at all of that. So right now on the schedule, our next meeting is August 4th, and we have scheduled for that a dome update and a summer projects update. If you tell me August 4th is going to work, that's wonderful. We'll send an email out just to confirm. It's not a popular date for a board meeting, but we don't need to decide now. We'll send a note out, and if we have to reschedule that, do something else, I'm glad to do it. And like I said, we'll also reach out about getting together for a workshop to talk through some of both the goals and the very detailed presentation by M&P tonight. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Yeah, and thanks for everybody for joining us tonight. Thanks for those of you that are on Zoom as well. I know it's a busy time of year for everybody. So if I get a motion to adjourn, please. Phil, second. Campbell, all in favor? Meeting adjourned. Thank you so much, guys.
Thanks, guys.